10 years ago, Hearthstone was a completely different game. You get no free legendaries, no deck codes, and it was a struggle to get packs. So in today's video, we go over how Hearthstone was exactly 10 years ago and how it is different from today. Let's start in the main screen, as this was a time where you just had one option to play constructed Hearthstone. So here already quite a few things changed. Let's start with the modes, because these modes, Twist, Standard and Wild, didn't exist 10 years ago. Standard and Wild only became a thing with the first expansion of 2016. So before that, you just had Hearthstone and you had casual, but that's really just ranked versus non-ranked. Another thing that was different back then was the rank system. I mean, Legend has stayed the same, but back then we had rank 25 to rank 1. Now we have Bronze to Diamond. Now this may look the same with just a different name, but it really was different back then. Well, Legend has remained the same. The rest was pretty different. First of all, there were no bonus stars, so you had to actually win a game to get a star. So don't get a bunch of stars for a win in the beginning like we do now. Also, you were matched based on your rank. So if you were, say, rank 5, you'd face another player that was rank 5. So there could be, for example, the rank 1 legend player from the previous season or an actual rank 5 player. So the quality of opponents could really vary. Well, now you get opponents based on MMR. Also, there were no rank floors besides in legend and at rank 20. So if you were one win away from legend, you could actually drop all the way back to rank 20. That didn't quite happen to me once, but one time I was one win away from Legend and dropped back to like rank 8, and that was pretty painful. That could happen. Now you'll stay at Diamond 5 at the worst, and you can never drop below that rank in a season. And another thing is we had no rewards back then for your rank besides hitting Legend and getting a card back. Nowadays you get a whole lot more stuff, as you can see here. You can check the rewards. Back then, yeah, there was nothing. I mean, you got the card back for playing 5 games like this one. We already had that. And then if you had Legend the first time, you got another card back. But all of these rewards, yep, there was just nothing. And the last thing here is that, we only had 9 deck slots for some reason. Apparently, this was too complicated for players, and that's why they limited deck slots to 9. But nowadays, we can at least have more deck slots. I think we can have up to 27 now. Really weird that they were limiting that for so long. Now, you see already these decks here. Let's go over some of the decks that were played back then, and how different the game was, because the game was very different back then. First of all, you couldn't just copy these decks like I did here. There were no deck codes, so you had to manually add all these cards one by one from a deck list you saw somewhere. Pretty tedious to do that. And then here we have the Secret Paladin, one of the most popular decks, and this deck was all about the Mysterious Challenger. Back then this was a 6 mana 6/6, and when you played that on turn 6, you often just won the game right there, because you got like these 5 secrets here. It was very hard to deal with a threat like that. There was just no good removal, and this deck just had a really strong curve, as you can see. It like Secret Keeper on 1, then Shielded Minibot 2, and if you couldn't deal with those, they would just get buffed by cards like Avenge and the Competitive Spirit, and then the game was just over for you. The deck was really strong. I mean, cards like Piloted Shredder, it might not look like a great card right now, because we have a neutral 4/3 that summons a 3/2 and summons a 2/1, which is way better than this one that just doesn't see any play. This card was really the meta back then. This was played in pretty much every mid-range deck, and a big reason for that, there were just less board clears. There were less swing turns, so like a 2-in-1 threat, like this Piloted Shredder, really worked out, because you didn't have a lot of card generation or card draw. So killing this card with like a Frostbolt meant that you were basically a card down, while they still had a 2-drop on the board. So that made this card really good for quite a while. Also because a lot of keywords didn't exist to come back back then. There was no rush, no lifesteal, so once you fell behind, it was actually really difficult to come back. Also with very little card draw, it was actually pretty difficult to always have an answer. And with there being no lifesteal and just barely any healing in general, every point of health mattered, because there was no way to recover it. Just a very different time. Though there was one deck, we'll get to that here. It's the Arena Lock that did have a huge heal with Reno Jackson from the League of Explorers, which was the expansion that Discover got introduced. But back then, Discover wasn't really used that often. The Discover cards from the League of Explorers just weren't that great, so there wasn't a whole lot of that. It really started with like Ungoro, I think, and we really got a lot of Discover cards that started seeing play. But Reno Jackson, kind of crazy to think about that, but this card alone just made entire archetypes. Nowadays, we have like Zilliax that can do the same thing as Reno Jackson with no deck building requirements. But back then, having a full heal, like having a Reno Jackson on turn 6 against an aggro deck basically was an insta-win. That's how powerful healing was. And the decks were just very different, as you can see here. There's a lot of big threats in here, right? The Molten Giant, I mean, Jiraxis, which was 9 mana, summoning 6/6. There weren't even hero cards back then either. This was just a minion. I mean, Dr. Boom was the big bad of these years. This was in every deck. deck, just a huge threat that just wasn't easy to deal with. The only easy way to deal with that was the Big Game Hunter, which was also in a lot of decks for 3 mana, because it was one of the few good removal cards that you had back then to deal with good minions. We also saw a lot of Ironbeak Owls. This was also very, very common at 2 mana, because after next round has a lot of Death Rattles were being played, cards like the Sludge Belcher here, or just Sylvanas from Classic. Those are really strong cards, and it was really a pain to deal with a card like Sylvanas, because again, swing turns, they weren't very common, and then Sylvanas could really provide a swing turn, like you played Sylvanas into Ragnaros, and then Sylvanas stole the Ragnaros. Yeah, that was often just game over. So just very different from now, where you kind of expect that to happen every single turn. And while I said there wasn't a lot of draw back then, there was one deck though that did draw a ton, of course. That was Rogue. As always, this deck had a ton of card draw, even though this deck wasn't running a Gadgets and Auctioneer. Instead, it was running Sprint, which I believe was 7 mana at that point, but Preparation reduced by 3 mana. So it was Sprint was basically 4 mana, draw 4 cards. That kind of card draw was just pretty much unheard of back then outside of Rogue. And yeah, Rogue had that, and also we had the cards like Earthen Ring Farseer being played in multiple decks. I think we already saw it in Arena Lock, but yeah, this card, imagine this card seeing play now. No way, but back then, like I said, healing was very rare, so just restoring 3 health was actually pretty valuable. As well as a card like Violet Teacher. I mean, imagine this card seeing play now. Yeah, I don't think so, but back then, yeah, being able to play like this and then something like Prep Eviscerate plus Violet Teacher was a really strong turn 4 play. Just get ahead on board, get those 1/1s. And then that Violet Teacher that had to be cleared. And at 5 health, it was actually pretty difficult to clear. And like I just said, Prep was reducing cards by 3 mana. And it's because back then, there were barely any patches, like I mean, really rarely. I think up until this point, 10 years ago, there were a total of 10 cards nerfed in almost 2 years. Yeah, 10 cards. That is less than we get nowadays in a 1 balance patch every couple of weeks. It was extremely rare to change cards, but it also meant some cards really stayed broken for like months and months. A famous example is the Undertaker. We can search here. This card, this is how it got released, and nowadays it would just be a not so special card. But back then, yeah, you played this on 1 and the opponent couldn't clear it. The game was just over. This card was so incredibly powerful that basically Hunter was tier 1 the entire time. This card just dominated for over half a year before it got nerfed. I mean, that's kind of unheard of nowadays. A deck like that would probably now be nerfed in a couple of weeks. And also what we saw back then was a lot of old archetypes. I mean, this is sort of a version of a Miracle Rogue, right? We have here some other decks that were meta back then. The Combo Druid, you know, this one, yeah, pretty much seen play since the start of Hearthstone. And we can say the same thing about like a Control Warrior. These archetypes, yeah, they changed a bit how the deck works, but we just had a lot of the same archetypes still almost 2 years since the game launched in 2014. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because we had no core set. We just had a basic set with a bunch of very basic cards like Chillwind Jedi and Boulderfist Ogre, cards that you don't really want to play. So those were the free cards. Nowadays you just get a bunch of free stuff. Right now we have a lot of legendaries that are just free to get, that you can play with. It's way different. Back then you had to craft every legendary, and it was really hard to come by packs and by dust. We'll go over that in a little bit. It also meant that the meta changed pretty slowly. I think often on ladder we saw cheap decks like Zoo and Face Hunter be very, very common because they were very cheap to build, didn't require many or any legendaries at all. So that meant if you wanted to start Hearthstone and you didn't want to just spend money on buying packs, you pretty much had to play one of those 2 decks to be competitive. And that just meant also the meta changed very slowly, because if there was a new deck popping up, well, not everybody could craft that deck, because again, it was very hard to come by new cards, gold, dust. So you often just had to stick with the archetypes you had already crafted and then try and get more packs to be able to craft maybe a new deck. But then again, it didn't happen too often, also because there weren't a lot of stats websites back then where you could just look up the stats for any card, any deck to see what was really better. So that was another reason the meta changed very, very slowly. And another main reason why the meta changed slowly is that we just got way less cards. Nowadays we get 3 expansions per year, plus then 3 mini sets. But back then we got an adventure, then an expansion, then an adventure, and those adventures were just basically the mini sets that we have now. So just way less cards in a year and way less opportunities to actually change the meta. And let's go to the shop to just take a look at that. Okay, this isn't quite a shop, but this is where the adventures are. And back then, the first adventure we got was Curse of Noxramas. And adventures released 1 wing each week. So the first week you got the Arachnid Port. I think this might have even been free the first week. And then you got a bunch of cards from that wing that you could then play. And then a week later we got another wing, and another wing. And then we got to the end. And then it was like, I think 700 gold for each wing to get all of them, which wasn't too bad of a deal to get all those cards for 700 gold. Plus you get to play these boss encounters. But if you ever wanted to craft, say, the Undertaker, which I think was from the 4th wing, you have to get all the first 4 wings to be able to get that card. You couldn't just craft it, like now you can craft any mini set card. You couldn't do that, though it was pretty worth it though to buy an Ramas. The cards were really good. So now let's talk about the packs and go to the shop. So here we have the shop, and the shop is very different. It used to be a way simpler shop. You could just buy packs, you could buy adventures, or you could buy one of the 3 skins that were available. Yeah, there were only 3 skins that you could buy in the first 2 years. Nowadays, you just get like a free skin every other week, but back then, yeah, skins were super rare, and it was pretty rare to see one. But let's move on to packs. So packs, here we have the oldest packs, right? The first expansion here we got Goblins versus Gnomes. Now, if you buy 10 packs of Goblins versus Gnomes, there's going to be a guaranteed legendary in one of them, the first 10 packs. So that's really nice. You always have like a legendary from the newest expansion to work with. But back then, yeah, that wasn't there. You just had to get lucky with the legendaries, or until you reach the pity time of 40 packs. That was really bad. I think a famous example was with the Grand Tournament, is that there was no duplicate protection. Nope, you could actually open the same legendary an infinite amount of times. I know there's a famous example of somebody opening like 5 Bolf Ram Shields, an absolutely useless card. They opened that in 1 pack opening, and yeah, that's pretty awful. Like, you already low rolled getting Bolf Ram Shield, and then you got it a couple more times, like just awful. Nowadays, you would just get 4 other legendaries, so very likely get at least 1 very useful legendary. But back then, you could really get screwed by your RNG and just open the worst legendaries multiple times. And while you could still buy packs for 100 gold, it was way more difficult to get gold back then. So let's go to the rewards track, because that's nowadays where we get gold. But back then, yeah, there was no rewards track. All you had was these quests, and then these quests gave you gold. And that was pretty much it, outside of getting 10 gold for 3 wins. Yeah, you had to win 3 games to get the measly 10 gold. So if you're playing like a slower homebrew deck, you were barely getting any gold. While if you're playing a super fast, strong aggro deck, you were getting way more gold. So that made people gravitate more towards the faster decks, because that was just incentivized by the system. And nowadays, yeah, you just get XP based on the game time. It doesn't matter if you win or lose, outside of maybe a quest like here, win 2 games. So you don't actually get punished if you want to play slower decks. And like I said, there was no rewards track, so there was no free legendary you could get here, no packs you got quickly at the start of expansion, no free cards, another random epic for free. All this stuff on the rewards track, yeah, wasn't there. All you get was like the gold, like we get now later on the rewards track, where you get mostly gold, like here. But even then, you got way less gold and just no packs at all on the rewards track, no free cards, no free legendaries, no free skins here at the end. Nowadays, you just, whenever you complete a rewards track, you can choose from a free skin. Nothing like that back then. Also, there was no event track. There were barely any events really. There was barely anything they ever gave you for free. There's either get those quests done for gold, or yeah, buy the packs in the store for money. Those are really the main ways to get those packs, unless you were really good at Arena. And now here, yeah, this would be unthinkable, getting all this stuff for free. I mean, free skin, free epic, free packs. Nothing like this existed in 2016. The only thing we did have back then for packs was the Tavern Brawl, which gave you 1 pack a week if you won your first game in there. We also had no achievements back then to keep track of all this progress. You could just only see how many wins you had for a specific class. There's no Dark Moon Fair, although I'm not sure that's really a loss. We also had a ton of events going on, like offline and online. Like myself, I went to a lot of fireside gatherings, which were held like every month back then. We would gather up and play in like a local bar against other Hearthstone players. That was always really fun. Yeah, that doesn't really exist very much nowadays, or any really big offline events. They're just pretty much gone. And there was one big thing that we did have back then that we don't have anymore, and it's been a pretty big loss. It's the sorry emote. It's just gone.
I am sorry.
So not everything is better right now. Would you like to see anything else return from this time? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more of my videos going over all the cards, you can click right here. Thank you for watching, and until next time.